What stresses out the 16 personalities, and perhaps more importantly, what do each of the 16 personalities act like when they get stressed out? Now, you might have heard from the typology nerds about something called the types being in the grip. According to the theory, when a type gets really stressed out, they end up going into the grip of their inferior cognitive function. If you want an in-depth discussion of the inferior function and just the cognitive functions in general, check out this video right here called What Are Cognitive Functions? This theory of being in the grip, it basically says that each of the personality types acts a certain way when they get stressed, which is usually counter to their normal way of acting. And haven't we all felt that way, where we're getting stressed out and we just become someone who we not normally are? Are you in the grip? Before we get into that, beverages. Do you drink them? Mugs. They contain beverages for you so they do not spill on the ground. It has a handle so that you may lift it to your face and drink. And it is a rounded here we have the introverted intuition mug. If you want to support the channel and get a container for your beverage, head over to infj.me/store, pick up one for yourself, or maybe you want this hoodie that's hanging up over there. You can get that too. Okay, so here's a little example for us. I think it's best to just jump right in and show you a particular type as an example. Here's an INFJ's cognitive functions. So up here we have introverted intuition, which is the dominant function of an INFJ. So that's why there's a big star around it. That's the star of the show for this personality type. This is the thing that this type is in autopilot in all the time. It is the best tool for INFJs to use. They have discovered, hey, introverted intuition gets me pretty far, and hey, extroverted feeling also helps a lot. Most types are just rolling with their top two functions all the time, and that's fine most of the time, especially in situations that are not so stressful. It's just like, yeah, I'm getting by with these two, and you know, when it's not so stressful, occasionally I can do these other ones down here as well. Your third function for an INFJ, that's introverted thinking. But then this one down here, that's the inferior function. You will note it is the opposite of the dominant function. So you gotta have balance here, right? And so if you are overcompensating, you are putting things over the top into your dominant function, you are relying on this all the time, this one, the inferior function, gets ignored. It gets neglected. The INFJ, as in this example, does not want to use extroverted sensing and tries to get by as much as possible without it. When things get stressful and when the stakes get higher, because I think as we get stressed, we perceive that the stakes are higher. And by the stakes are higher, I do not mean a ribeye is 10 feet in the air. What I mean is that we perceive that the outcome is extremely important. We have a desired outcome and it's really important that we get it, and if we don't, the negative consequence is also very bad. So as a basic example, writing an essay, high stakes situations. If you fail, it's not good. You don't want to deal with those consequences. So as the stakes get higher, you rely more and more on the dominant and second functions, especially the dominant one though. And so for an INFJ, when the stakes get higher, they are like, how can I just keep over planning? How can I just keep relying on the patterns and concepts that I know already so that I don't have to address the extroverted sensing, which is life happening in reality, in real time, all the new data, the facts coming at me, what is just happening around me right now. I want to avoid all of that chaos, and I can't afford having to do extroverted sensing in this high stakes, stressful situation. So I need to do introverted intuition, my hero, my star player on the team. I'm giving him the ball so that he can go and score a touchdown. So ridiculous. But that's basically what it is, right? If you were a coach In a football game, I know so many of you watching are sports fans. If you're the coach, you're gonna give the ball to your best player. Every personality type does the same thing. But here's the problem. And here's where grip theory starts to go a bit off the rails. And this is where I disagree. Grip theory says that as the stress mounts, eventually you burn out this cognitive function, your dominant one, and because everything has to come to equilibrium at some point and you've been suppressing this one so much, eventually this one just comes out of nowhere and takes over. And this, my friends, is what we call being in the grip. The inferior function comes out of freaking nowhere and it just grabs you. And so then you end up using this function in a very childlike way, in a very immature way, in a way that is usually laced with anger and frustration. It's just not like you normally are. The first part is right. The first part, obvious, because we're always relying on the dominant function, especially in a stressful situation. So it's interesting, you'll see types kind of harden in their dominant function as the stressful situation continues and gets worse. So, an ENTJ or ESTJ under a lot of stress, they're going to double down on extroverted thinking. So they're going to start bossing everyone around and be like, we got to get stuff done now, you donkey. ESFJs and ENFJs, when they're under stress, will be like, okay, we got to make sure everyone's happy. Like they will move away from the actual problem and be like, are you happy? Let me take care of you. Let me figure out something you need and I'll do that for you. ESTPs and ESFPs, when they're over relying on their dominant function in stress, they will over focus on irrelevant details and be like, well, this is catastrophic. They can't zoom out to see the context of what's actually going on. Similarly with ENTPs and ENFPs, they will just start dreaming up all the different possible terrible outcomes that could happen due to like one little thing. If they get a bruise on their arm, they'll be like, I am dying. ISTJs and ISFJs under stress get very, very rigid and they're like, if this isn't the way that I have done things forever, not doing it in a different way. If this isn't the facts that I know already, if I can't look back and see that we have done it this way before, I am not deviating from that, even if the situation is different and calls for some kind of new idea. INFJs and INTJs under stress will be doing something similar where they're just like really looking hard to figure out what is going on here under the surface. They'll have this situation, the house is on fire, and they're like, where have I seen this before? What is the pattern here? Well, instead of just like calling the fire department, and of course this is a ridiculous example, but it's like they're just trying to figure out, oh man, why? Why did this happen? INTPs and ISTPs, they will, under stress, start to criticize people and just be like, you're an idiot, what you think is wrong, what I think is right, we're going with that. INFPs and ISFPs will be like, I reject all of your ideas and whatever that you think is gonna be the right way to do this, and I'm just gonna go with my gut instinct and what I like, what I think is good. But the theory says that a step farther than that is the grip. I said the greer. No, the grip. Let me zoom in for this. This is very important. Stress does not put you in the grip of your inferior function. I don't think that that is correct. Grip theory saying stress leads you to overuse your dominant function is reasonable. I mean, it seems obvious, but then that would lead you to use your inferior function. I get why they say that. Their argument basically is that, hey man, you've done this so much, you've done the dominant function so much that the other function, the inferior function, has to come out. It can't be ignored any longer. In a sense, this is true, but this doesn't mean that the stress causes that. So then you're like, well, Frank, well, what? If this is the case and grip theory is incorrect, then why do people act unlike themselves? Why do they sometimes act like their opposite type in a really immature form when they are stressed out? So let's look at an INTP as an example to take us through stress and the 16 personalities and what is actually going on with the inferior function. So they're going through life, the INTPs, riding high on introverted thinking and extroverted intuition. That's how they're doing their whole life. They're navigating it with those two for the most part. The problem is that over time, they are continually ignoring and letting the extroverted feeling build up. And this is interesting because this is where the grip stuff, the grip theory actually gets, I think, a few of the types wrong, specifically the IPs, because they will say when an INTP is in the grip, they will just become very emotional and they'll be distrustful of communities and they'll feel like everyone hates them, which is true to a degree, but the thing is, there's really a lot more to it. While they are doing their day-to-day life, just doing these things and ignoring the FE, it is building up, and everyone around knows this, especially with an IP, it has to do with everyone else. Everyone is like, dude, you don't care how we feel. You're doing your own TI thing and you're ignoring the FE, and we don't like that. And it builds up over time without the INTP realizing it, and this kind of creates stressful situations that did not need to be stressful and are overly amplified because the INTP has been ignoring the extroverted feeling for so long. So in a sense, yes, the grip theory is right that, you know, if you ignore the inferior function long enough, it has to come out in a way, but it is not provoked by stress. It's kind of the other way around, where ignoring the inferior function makes it come out, and that causes the stress. Suddenly, you gotta deal with it. That in and of itself is very stressful. You've let the bad feelings with other people build up. You've ignored the sensory world for long enough, and now you gotta figure out how you're gonna work in the sensory world. Life requires all four functions, so eventually you're gonna have to do your inferior function. All the INFJs watching, you're gonna have to do extroverted sensing at some point. You're not gonna be able to get around it forever. You're gonna be forced into a situation where you are using it and you hate it and you feel embarrassed and you feel frustrated and you're like, there's no way out of this. This is the worst thing ever and I am so stressed out. They will suddenly become way different than they normally are as they work through the inferior function, which they have ignored so long that they now must face it. I don't think that it is some kind of like psychic thing where it's like, oh, well, this is just naturally bubbling up to the surface. It really a lot of times has to do with the situations that we create in our lives, like the actual sensory situations. I think one of the exceptions though, and one of the ones that the grip theory explains best, is the EJs, especially the ESTJ and the ENTJ, because they have inferior introverted feeling, and so if you are suppressing your own emotions, yes, eventually those just bubble up and explode, and it doesn't look good. Which of the 16 personalities is most emotional? I bet you're wondering. Well, check out that video right here, and until next time, stay cool and attractive.